So, Alison, you've had 4 Christmases in Aotearoa, New Zealand now? Yeah?
Yes, 4 on and off.
And does it get any less weird?
No. Hot weather Santa is so weird to me.
But you're from Texas. Are
I
you
know.
telling me you have a white Christmas in Texas?
But a white Christmas in Texas is always possible. It's like attainable if you just wish hard enough, Emily Duncan.
Kia ora, hello, and welcome to this episode of Play Notes Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Duncan.
And I'm also your host, Alison Horsley.
And we're both dramaturgs, meaning we read a lot of plays.
We've likely read the plays you feel you should have, but didn't.
And that's where Play Notes comes in. And today we are starting on the first of 3 monologues.
Yes.
And it just so happens, the very first monologue we're going to discuss is a New Zealand monologue set over a New Zealand Christmas.
Yes, the classic Kiwi Christmas monologue. We've all heard of it. I had heard of it early on when I moved here.
Right.
It took me a while to actually see it, but of course we're talking about The End of the Golden Weather
By Bruce Mason.
Bruce Mason.
And we should, note that this is a Pākehā colonial view of Christmas in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but still it's very specific to this place, and we're going to be talking a bit more about that. End of the Golden Weather is, of course, I'm very excited to finally be talking about a New Zealand play
Yes.
in this first series. And End of the Golden Weather was first produced in 1960. So, it is very much of its era, but it still resonates a lot now. We both saw a production produced by a local company, WOW, last year.
Mm-hmm. It was WOW Productions.
Yes.
I mean, also WOW, but WOW Productions.
Yeah, here in Ōtepoti, Dunedin, New Zealand.
Yes.
Yes. Directed by Lisa Warrington, acted by Matt Wilson.
Yes.
And it was really quite superb. They toured in the spirit of Bruce Mason, because let me just look at my stats.
Yeah, tell us about Bruce Mason.
Well,
I'm also just going to point out Emily Duncan is a Bruce Mason playwriting award winner.
This is by coincidence. We chose this play before I...
Tell us about Bruce Mason, Emily.
Okay, so, he is, a very significant, still a significant playwright in New Zealand, for whom the Bruce Mason Award is named, of course. He's known for his multi-character cast plays as much as his monologues.
What's one of his famous multi-character
There's
cast
the
plays?
Aotearoa Tree.
Okay.
It's probably one of the most well-known. I think I studied that in maybe 6th form at school, which is now year 12. So it's the second to last year of high school in New Zealand.
Okay.
It still gets produced occasionally. In some aspects it has dated. It's probably not the most culturally astute.
This is Aotearoa Tree or End of the Golden Weather?
It's a Aotearoa Tree. But also, for the time when he wrote it and was first produced, it was groundbreaking. Yeah.
Nice.
And, kudos to him for doing groundwork in that sense at a time.
Because it was characters were Maori and also Pākehā.
Yeah. That wasn't really done by anyone else. And, he did a lot of work towards, helping us foster and put on stage, distinct Kiwi vernacular. Yeah, it's been a bit of a long road.
Yeah.
Getting there.
Still finding a voice.
Still there now. Yeah. So, tip of the hat to that. But, End of the Golden Weather was a monologue. It was semi-autobiographical. It's set on a beach that he refers to as Te Paranga, which is, in fact...
Takapuna Beach, I think. Which is, in Auckland.
Yeah.
For those of you not familiar.
And if you read or see the play, there's also a 1991 film version. That's how I first saw it. I remember our school was taken along to see it. Yeah.
Oh, to the movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you must be able to see that somewhere. Yeah, it's got very recognisable Auckland Tamaki Makaurau landmarks.
Yeah,
Yeah, even
yeah.
though it's set in this fictional place.
So Kiwi classic in a way.
Very much so. And also it's set at a time sort of just post the Great Depression. So one of the historical events it references are the Queen Street riots. And it's all told through the eyes of a 12-year-old boy. And this is something that particularly appeals to me about the play. And I think some of the real skill can be found in it, because how the story is told through this 12-year-old boy's eyes. He's sort of very earnest in a way, but not self-pitying. There is humour. There's that real balance of both wonder and also a bit of horror at the world. So, for example, the recounting of the Queen Street riots.
Yeah. From a
Gives it a
12-year-old boy's perspective of living through this and seeing the people in the neighborhood, essentially participating in this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's multiple characters in the play that the performer takes on, the narrator. So Bruce Mason wrote this play, as many monologues start out, is for he himself to perform. And we were talking earlier about some other sort of well-known monologues that people might want to tap into if they're interested.
Yeah, so there, I mean, of course, these kind of span different parts of recent theater history, but of course, Spalding Gray was like a master of the monologue.
Monster in a Box.
Yeah.
And a lot of his work can be found on YouTube.
At Swimming to Cambodia.
So I think Swimming to Cambodia. Yeah.
Yeah, so certainly he, Billy Crystal's 700 Sundays, which is a bit more recent.
And quite a very personal piece as well.
Yeah, entirely personal. I mean, of course, there's the next two monologues that we'll cover here on Play Notes, which will be Vagina Monologues and Fleabag. So those go without saying. But also, one that I was talking about earlier was I Am My Own Wife, which is not written to be a monologue performed by the writer, but it's another example of one of these monologues in which the performer plays dozens of roles.
Right.
So it's kind of a triumphant performance for a solo actor, basically, to pull this off, because they're playing so many different parts. So go ahead.
Well, we were also talking about the focus of this episode around, why monologues often come to be.
Yeah.
As from often a very pragmatic, practical place.
Yeah, and you started writing actually with a monologue, right?
That was my very first play. It was called Lips. I had trained as an actor. I trained at the Lee Strasberg in New York City. I was back in Wellington, New Zealand, studying towards a theatre degree, and I thought, hey, why don't I just write something for myself to perform in the Fringe Festival?
Okay.
And that's how it all got started. And I imagine that's the case with a lot of people who write monologues. I could do it with no budget. I didn't really need to get anyone else involved, because of course this was on quite a small scale. But that becomes much more possible with producing a monologue, say, versus producing Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
Or Merchant of Venice, or Othello, or even the Greek tragedies.
Oh, yeah,
Even though they don't have three main actors, you've still got your chorus, and, you need to bring your cranes in. And
your dragon chariots are not cheap.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so it's necessity, and then also creative control in some ways as well.
Yes.
And it seems like Bruce Mason created this out of that sense of necessity, and there being a lack of, I guess, roles for him, and playwriting opportunities in terms of full-time playwriting.
It's a form of self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
And I don't think I gave this stat. So the play was first produced in 1960. By 1978, he had performed it 968 times.
That is unreal.
And it's a properly full-length work.
Yeah.
It's, it has an intermission. It goes for a couple of hours at least, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
It's
Yeah.
It's a big meaty part. But also, from memory, the set only requires a table and a chair or 2 chairs. It's very simple. He would tour it around the regions in New Zealand as well. In that sense, I think of it almost like a community theatre work.
Yeah.
And that he would be billeted with people.
Oh, yeah. So
you-
just members of the community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, the head of the Women's Institute in whatever region.
Has
say,
a guest room.
Well, yes, we'll take Mr. Mason in for the weekend and,
Yeah.
and
So
then he can perform it at the community hall.
Yeah. Well, and so in thinking back to some of the Shakespeares that we were talking about those plays as being the advent of professional theater in England. And I was just thinking about the fact that in some ways, this play and Bruce Mason's work certainly contributed to the existence of professional theater in New Zealand.
Being a jobbing actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now,
Performer,
of course, he's a legend.
director, producer.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a legend in terms of New Zealand theater, and but at the time it was necessity.
So something else we were going to talk about with this particular script is it has a sort of interesting structure, and we were thinking how that lines up with the plays we were talking about back at the start with those, Aristotle's ideals of what a play should
Yeah,
be like.
yeah,
Do
with
you want
like
to talk to that a bit, Alison?
Well, like in traditional Aristotelian structure, you have like an exposition and a rising action and a climax and a falling action and a denouement, as it were.
Untying.
Yeah, the untying or the tying up of the loose ends, like the end part. And with this play, it's more like a snapshot of a recollection of childhood, but it's not just one event. It's you were making the observation that it almost covers the same period of time, but with 2 different lenses almost, or tell us about
so
this.
there's this character, Firpo, who's referred to in the sort of first telling of the story as our many different characters.
Yeah,
and
he
it's so
just
much
shows
fun
up.
for all the different, vignettes and portraits of the different, like there's a vicar on the beach and there's the woman who goes swimming and,
Yeah. So the kid is observing these people and describing them and also being them momentarily as well. Or the performer is.
And there's a reference to this character of Firpo, but then the second half of the play goes back to where it started chronologically, but with Firpo as a central character alongside the narrator.
Yeah, and the narrator's evolving understanding of who Firpo is within the society, and also...
Firpo's an outsider, whereas the narrator aligns himself with him.
Yeah, and then kind of realizes exactly how much of an outsider Firpo really is in this community.
And the lengths he goes to, we were saying that...
The narrator...
He goes and buys this... He wants to build Firpo up for this...
a race.
Racing competition.
Yeah, Firpo wants to be pretty much an Olympian in a variety of contests, and the local boys challenge him to a race on the beach. So our unnamed narrator is like wanting to build Firpo up because he's very skinny.
And he takes all of his pocket money and goes to the butcher, and the butcher gives him this huge... Was it a ham?
It's a joint of ham.
Or lamb. It's just this huge piece of meat. He takes it to Firpo, who then says, well, I don't eat meat.
Yeah, I'm a vegetarian.
Yeah, and then he has to take home to his mother, who's just appalled and already has a roast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and the narrator just kind of plays it off. He's like, well, I was just trying to be helpful. Bye. And just kind of runs off. And it hurts. It just hurts so much because I identify with that desire of childhood to be helpful and to be giving, but not quite know how to do it, and to try and cover up a misunderstanding, that you have when you're a kid about how things work or hurt feelings, and it just kills me still.
But there's no self-pity. And
No,
this is where
not
the
at all.
writing is really good.
Yeah, the kid, he just sort of is like he's not even horrified. He's just trying to deal with it and
Next
then moves
thing.
on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we won't blow what happens with Furpo, but it's weirdly the race is both it's a satisfying experience of the race and also a heartbreaking experience of the race. It's both. And that's something that Bruce Mason really captures. He captures the kind of the glory and also that ache of I don't know, life, of like daily life and of nostalgia and looking back on your
coming
life.
of age.
Yeah.
At the end of the golden weather, in a way, is the reference to a degree, the end of innocence.
Yeah.
When you're younger and it feels like summer goes on forever and...
I never had that, did you? It goes on for all of Christmas, that's for sure.
In New Zealand. It's really easy to get hold of a copy of the text of End of Golden Weather. It's well published.
Emily Duncan is showing her copy of The End of the Golden Weather to the microphone right now.
Yes. Look, Hop Guard, look. Can you see?
But yeah, readily available, and it's really fun to read.
It reads like a novella or something.
Yeah, it is.
Postscript.
I will say, with my foreigner perspective, definitely coming to it, I was struck by how very Pākehā it was in that, especially in the opening moments of the, 1,000 years of history coming over to New Zealand. It's very Eurocentric. But that's the
nature... Which we can't look past.
Yeah, which you can't look past, and yet that is the nature of this snapshot of this point in history. So that's a complicating factor for sure when you talk about producing it and all of that. But it's a beautiful read as a coming of age story.
Yeah. And well, I won't do Bruce Mason justice. I had picked out a little favourite bit, which, again, references what we were talking about at the start, the Christmas in New Zealand.
Yes.
And we consider our beautiful Aotearoa trees to be the unofficial New Zealand Aotearoa Christmas tree. The beach is fringed with Aotearoa trees, single and stunted in the gardens, spreading and noble on the cliffs, and in the empty spaces by the foreshore. Tiny red coronets prick through the grey-green leaves. Bark, flower and leaf seem overlaid by smoke. The red is of a dying fire at dusk, the green faded and drab. Pain and age are in these gnarled forms, in bare roots clutching at the earth, knotting on the cliff face, in tortured branches dark against the washed sky.
Christmas in New Zealand is not so bad.
Yeah, suspend your disbelief.